Hello everyone, and welcome to our very last panel of this event. So this panel has a title, Where Did My Research Take Me? So some of you here have already some MSCA experience or maybe even ERC experience, but also many people here or many people who are listening to us don't have any experience. So we wanted to let them hear some backstage stories from people who already were or currently are on MSCA fellowship, and to see how did they get it, did this help them in their life, professionally or privately, and to see how is it going for them now. So today we have here 3 panelists. We were supposed to have 4, but unfortunately Gabrijel Smoljkić from Greyp Bikes apologized, he could not come today here. But we have still Azra Frkatović, so she's a PhD student, currently working in Genos on MSCA project. She came from Bosnia and Herzegovina to Croatia 2 years ago, 2.5, something like that. Yeah, so we would like to hear her experience of coming to Croatia and what was the whole experience of coming and living in Croatia. How did you like it here? Did you like it here? Maybe not, I don't know. And so she will present a PhD student coming to Croatia. Then we have Dr. Tanja Vučković Juroš. She will present a postdoctoral fellow of Marie Curie Sklodowska fellowships. So she had some experience already abroad. She was like more than 2 years abroad in Belgium. And now she's back to Croatia, to University of Zagreb, where she's now leading a project. And then we also have Edward Legg. He is coming from UK, and currently he's working at University of Rijeka. So maybe he had a bit different story of coming to Croatia, but we are also very happy to hear this. And just to say, so we have biologists, sociologists, and psychologists here today, so let's hear their stories. Azra, you can start.
Thank you, Iva, for this nice introduction. So I would first like to thank Dragomira and Iva for inviting me to be part of this panel, but also for you for sticking this long on Sunday. So my name is Azra Frkatović, and I originally come from Bosnia, and I will tell you a bit about my experience in IMforFUTURE ITN network that I had here in Croatia. I actually already finished my ITN let's say, contract, but I'm still at the same institution that I previously was. So before starting my ITN, I got my undergraduate and master's degree back in Bosnia in genetics, and I was mainly doing wet lab-based research at the university, and I was also participating in the teaching as a teaching assistant during the lab exercises at the same department. Then after my master's degree, I then actively started looking for a job and for a PhD. But unfortunately, one of the problems that students back in Bosnia face is that there is not enough information. We are not getting informed well enough about the opportunities we have. Our opportunities back in Bosnia are not, we don't have many opportunities, but we are not also being informed about opportunities we have in other countries, especially in the EU. So I was actually lucky enough to get my professor to recommend this position to me to apply. And then, to be honest, at that point I wasn't really aware of what an ITN position meant. But then I was lucky enough to find out once I became a member of IMforFUTURE in February 2018 in Genos. So IMforFUTURE itself stands for Innovative Training and Methods for Future Data. So the whole idea of the network was to bring together biologists, chemists, but also on the other side, statisticians and mathematicians in order to kind of develop methods to look into the big data that is being produced nowadays in human cohorts. So I also started my PhD, but only 6 months later at the University of Zagreb. So for me, it was actually a quite smooth transition coming back from Bosnia because I didn't have this major culture change. I didn't have this language obstacle, and regarding the whole administration, just getting my permit and also integrating into the company itself was really a smooth process. I was actually quite happy to find out that to see that I didn't have any problems when I heard that other people do face these issues. But thankfully we have Sandra that can always help. So one other, let's say, positive thing for me was to experience this company environment as opposed to the university or academic environment that I previously was in. And as I said, just not being too far away from home has definitely made it much easier for me. But of course, I did face a few challenges. Now, first starting with getting introduced to the whole new field, because as I said, I had a degree in genetics, but now I was being introduced to the field of glycobiology, which is this major field that the company that I was working in specializes in. And then I completely transitioned from wet to dry lab. So I was completely replaced my lab coat, my micropipette with the computer, and just solely relying on the data and all the methods I could apply to find the answers. And then, of course, as I said, the network had also statisticians, biologists, so at the beginning it wasn't really easy to understand what other people were talking about, but of course that has become better throughout these 3 years. So my project itself was on the genetic regulation of immunoglobulin G glycosylation. So you might have heard about immunoglobulin G because it is a quite important component of our immune system, and it's a major player in the defense of our body when we encounter some pathogen. So my job was to actually investigate the genetic background of these. You can see it has these sugar molecules that are attached to it, and they can largely modify the effect of IgG in this immune response. So my main objective was to kind of look into the genes that are involved in the regulation of this process by using the data sets derived from large cohorts and kind of integrating different data types such as like genetic data, glycan data, epigenetic data to try to find these relationships to see how this process is regulated. So besides, of course, just being in an ITN, you can really be provided with all the tools and data you need to answer these questions, but I would say that my ITN experience was kind of made even better with all different opportunities we are provided with, beginning from the training weeks itself. I'm sure many of the ESRs also here know that we got training across different disciplines, different topics from not just biology, statistics, data integration. And one, I would say, specific thing about our project is that we would get homework. So we had homework assignments. After each training week, we would get homework. At that time, it wasn't really fun to do them because it would take days to solve some of the questions. But looking back now, I would say I appreciate them much more because it would allow me to assess the knowledge at that point after getting these trainings, to see what I learned, and maybe later in the research I encounter similar problems, so it was much easier to solve them. And of course, just like with meetings in the network, you have the opportunity to get feedback from the people in the network on your project progress. And of course, one of the biggest pluses I would say is the network itself, just the people in the network, as I said, people with different backgrounds, which provide this great support system. For example, if you are a scientist who has this data set in front of them, and you can always now go to the person who handled the biological sample, who developed the protocol to analyze the data, to produce this big data set. Then you can go to the statistician who can tell you, okay, these are the methods you should use to recognize some patterns, some associations in your data, and ultimately you can go to the biologist who can kind of tell you what those effects in your data you are seeing could mean. So I would also say that besides this professional network, you of course meet great people that can remain your friends for hopefully for life. And one important segment in ITNs are of course the secondments, because we get a chance to visit different laboratories, different research groups, to learn about different methods that we could apply in our own research. And of course, just the experience of living in another country, because it could also give you an idea of what you want, where you want to go in the future. And of course, this also means expanding your network, because sometimes now you can put the name to the email that you've been emailing for the past half a year. Now you can finally meet the person, which will kind of make your communication in the future much easier. Also throughout the ITN, I would say I was provided with also other opportunities with the training in transferable skills, other soft skills, and of course the event organization, such as the organization of our workshop and the final conference of the ITN itself. But I was also really lucky to be connected to the people from MCAA, both Croatian and Western Balkans chapters, and I was involved also in the organization of MCAA annual conference that was supposed to happen here in Zagreb. And just as Sandra was saying earlier, we know that EEC puts really this big emphasis on public engagement. And we kind of, I would say we took this task quite seriously in our ITN. First through like this engagement through the social media, but also we literally went to the public. For example, here on this picture, you can see us in Split here in Croatia. We made our flyers that contain some basic ideas of what we are doing and why we are doing it. And then we were just talking to people on the street, both young and older people. Also, we participated in European Researchers' Night back in Sarajevo. And also we had this game that we made in our ITN and used it to kind of explain to kids why we are doing this research. At this point, I'm in a phase that I actually am writing my PhD thesis. Hopefully I will defend it soon and also publish the papers. But yeah, I plan to stay here for at least 1 year, let's say, and then later. But in the meantime, also explore the opportunities I have both in industry or academia. I'm still open to both options. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Azra. Okay, Tanja, let's hear your story.
Okay, so you heard 2 times from me already. I hope it's not too many, but you're gonna hear my story now. And it's a story about a round trip, which MSCA helped me to take. So when I first got my Marijsko Security Fellowship, that was in 2015 call. At the time, I have gotten my PhD, which I got in the States, and I was working for a couple of years at the University of Zagreb at the Faculty of Law. And then I got it, which was really amazing, but I also had a baby that came after the application. So there was a bit of extensions and part-time work, so everything took a bit longer. But it's important to know that real life is also part of the fellowship, so it has to be a part of the fellowship. So I finished it in 2019. I was at the University Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. And then I had a gap, so I was very lucky to be able to get a new fellowship, Marie Curie, which I got in this last year's call, and I started working in July now at the University of Zagreb, which is the round trip. It took me back to Zagreb, but it also took me to the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. And I was really, really happy about that because this is my alma mater. So I kind of, 15 years after I left it, after I got my BA thesis, I got back. So that was a very nice thing to experience. But also, I was very fortunate to get this career restart individual fellowship in the last year's call, because that was the last call under Horizon 2020. And Horizon Europe doesn't have career restart anymore. And also, I would be too old because too many years has passed from my PhD. So it was the last stream for me, so I'm very happy about that. And when I think about my first Marie Curie in Belgium, I think it was a really transformative experience for me. And it really transformed the way I think of myself, and it also transformed me as a researcher. And I always think about one particular point as a turning point, and that was an international conference I had organized during my mandate. And this is something I promised to in my fellowship, in my proposal, and that kind of came in between, just in the middle of the fellowship. And that was something I never ever did before, like organize international conference. And this was like a very new challenge for me. But also, since my fellowship was in a field that was new to me, I was also a bit of an outsider at the beginning. So I wasn't really part of the networks. I knew of the people, they didn't know of me. So that was a different kind of relationship. And now I had to organize a conference which I wanted to be relevant, to have people who matter something in the field. And I was like, just somebody who came and it was completely anonymous. But having this title, Maris Sklodowska-Curie, Postdoctoral Fellowship, was something that gave me confidence to really, like, if I send out an email, it will not be from nobody, it will be from somebody who has some kind of external validation of this prestigious fellowship that kind of tells us something about your research. So this was a really important point in boosting my confidence. So the first email I sent out was to this person, this emeritus professor who was like one of the biggest names, who was a person I admired very much. And I was like, okay, what can I lose? And he said yes. After I overcome my shock, I had a name to put to my other emails. And so that went very smoothly, and I got all people accepting to come to Louvain-la-Neuve in Belgium to a conference organized by like somebody who never published in the field. So it was an amazing experience. It meant a lot for me, and I think of that moment as becoming the part of the community. Like putting my research out there, getting to know people on a more personal basis, and like kind of really, really learning how to do a conference and how to do it with learning the up-to-date, state-of-the-art stuff from people who are like the best in what we were all researching. So this was something that I don't think would ever be possible without Marie Curie. The second thing that Marie Curie enabled me to do is that I started publishing in let's call them excellent journals, in journals that were very important for my field. And I think I did most of the publishing after my fellowship ended, because the process is very slow, both of the analysis and the publication process. So all but one were published after my fellowship. They're all green access though, so you can access them. But why I think I was able to do that, I think you have to take two things into consideration. The first is that the funding that you get in this fellowship, it's something that allows you to do things that otherwise would not have been possible. So you really can do a cutting-edge research, a novel research that you are funded for. So you kind of do have a contribution to make because you were given this funding, and this is kind of, I think, then seen in the publications that come out of the project. But also, and I think this is important to say, especially in Croatia and countries similar to Croatia, is that you have to dare to send your papers out there to this type of journals, because sometimes you just think your work is not good enough, or it's just not for that kind of journals. And again, having this validation by the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Fellowship kind of gives you this boost of confidence. Okay, why not try the most important journal? Let's see what happens. And what happens is that is not very different from what happens in journals in Croatia. But then at the end of the process, you get published in very good journal in terms of reputation, as opposed to in journal which nobody knows about. But the process is very similar, and you kind of learn a lot through it. And I think it's very much part of the experience of a fellow here. And the third thing that I want to say is that now that I'm starting my second fellowship, and this is a very ironic thing, I think I'm actually much more equipped to make good use of it, because I know much more about how to make use of all the opportunities that you are provided in the fellowship. And one of the things that that I think I will make much better use of it now is the public outreach element. So when I was preparing my first application, that was a part of the requirements. We all know that the Marie Curie is pushing the public engagement, but I really didn't know what that meant, and it was not really part of my comfort zone. So I did the usual things. I wrote what I will do, which was not very creative. It was very routinely written. But when I came to the part of my project where I have to do it, I actually started to think about it in a much more engaged way, to think about it more creatively. And what came out of this was this booklet that was mentioned earlier. So this is a booklet of results. It contains comics. Comics are based on my interviews. So this came as a result of my thinking, okay, I have publication, I have results, but what would I do if I want my neighbor to think about my research? If I want somebody in school to think about my research, what would I do? And I thought, like, I want them to have something that's engaging, because nobody will read the text they write in my scientific jargon, or even if I don't write in the jargon, it's still a very special type of writing which is not really accessible. So I wrote in a plain way the best I could. It's not the best way I could, but still I'm not trained in that, so I'm learning also how to write plainly. But I think that the comics were really the most important thing. And I translated this in 8 languages. This is available in all languages that were part of my study. It's available online, but I also have physical copies, which I hope to share while in conferences, but then COVID came and that plan went to the bin. So I never ever got the type of feedback of any of my publications, of any of my work, compared to what I got on the comics. And I think it was really something that was really gratifying for me as a researcher, to have a feeling that somebody is now engaging with my work. And this is something that I am now, in my second Marie Curie fellowship, planning to work really, really hard on how to be creative in public engagement, how to present your data so it is accessible, that it is engaging, that it is interesting, that it is reaching an audience beyond your typical suspects. Okay, so this is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ed, let's hear you.
Can I have the clicker?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for inviting me to this. Actually, when I got invited, I think I emailed back fairly quickly, or tried to email back quickly to be like, are you sure you want me to come? My experience is not like standard for moving to Croatia. And so this is kind of reflected by this squiggly line. So I've moved obviously from the UK to Croatia, but there was a little bit of complication in the middle of it. So I'll try and explain a little bit about where my research took me and this complication in the middle. So to start with, I should give a little bit of background about myself and the project. So I did a PhD and a postdoc in psychology. My main research focus is on social cognition and theory of mind. So social cognition is obviously something about understanding other people, their behaviors, what you might learn from them. And theory of mind is what psychologists refer to as like a subcomponent of this, about what people understand about others' mental states, their beliefs, what they see, their perspectives. So in previous work that we've done, we've set up a task a bit like this, where there's a character who can only see some of the objects available, and they're giving you, or the participant, a task, which in this case it's an online task. We're told to click on the largest blue mug. There's 3 mugs there, hopefully you can see it okay. And one of the mugs, the actual largest mug, is behind a barrier, it can't be seen. And so when the person is asking you click on the largest blue mug, you actually have to click on the middle-sized mug, not the largest mug. So this is kind of what I refer to when I'm talking about theory of mind. We know from children and other things that this develops around 4 years old, at least when you ask verbal questions. And you might think, well, he's a psychologist, he's studying with social cognition, he's probably working on adults and children, but actually for my PhD I was working on birds. I was working on Eurasian jays. This is a bit of a unusual thing. The lab that I was in is investigating animal behavior, and Eurasian jays are part of the corvid family, so this relates to crows and related species, and you might see occasionally articles in newspapers and things about how clever these are. For me, this was very interesting, and the reason that the jays were interesting to me and to the group that I was working in is because they hide food, and so they hide it for later, basically. And we were interested in whether they modify their behavior when they're watched. And so we could set up simple tasks, basically in this, behind me, this, you can't see the laser, but never mind. There's like a T-shaped barrier. One side had transparent glass or perspex on it, and one side was opaque, it couldn't be seen through, and they were being watched. And we were basically asking a very simple question: is the bird over there going to hide more food in the bit that can be seen, or the bit that couldn't be seen? So that's kind of a very basic level of things. Now you probably, I'm not sure if you're thinking it, but lots of people think it well, how does this relate to what we're doing on the other side, where we're asking adults and children about their beliefs and this kind of thing? Surely the birds are just doing it because they've learned something, or for some other reason. They're probably not reasoning about the other bird's mental state. And you're absolutely right to be skeptical about this, and this is exactly one of the reasons why I wanted to do my PhD and then some of the postdocs, is what's going on with these birds? But around the time I was doing this, there was also work in children and on adults. But if you look at non-verbal behaviors, so if you're looking at where children are looking, or sometimes searching tasks, then you can see that their expectations about other people's actions are sometimes based on those other person's beliefs. And so, although when you ask the children explicitly about another person's beliefs, they pass these tasks at 4 years old. Or other researchers have found that in some cases, 9-month-olds might be able to reason about other people's beliefs. And basically my Marie Curie project was bringing the skepticism that's applied to some of the animal literature to this literature on adults and infants. It also was trying to incorporate some new skills for me. Obviously, working on the birds, my human side of research was maybe not as developed as some other psychologists' things, and so I wanted to learn a little bit about eye tracking, which is the main technique used on infants, but also I wanted to develop a little bit a more neuroscience perspective. And so FNIRS relates to functional near-infrared spectroscopy. This is basically a way of passing infrared light through the skull, and you can measure the blood levels of the cortical areas of the brain using that, and it's really good for running on children, because firstly they have fairly thin skulls and everything passes through quickly, but compared to other techniques like MRI, where they have to go into a scanner, and this would be horrendous for a small baby, this is just a cap that fits over the head, so it's very uninvasive and easy to do. So to try and do this, I approached some people that I knew. They were in a lab in Italy. One of them had access to an FNIRS machine. It was their machine, but they weren't working on any kind of social cognition. And then the other one was working on theory of mind. I didn't really know him beforehand. And I basically asked, would you be interested in working together? Could I borrow your FNIRS machine for a bit and use it in the kind of theory of mind tasks that the other person is working on? And they said, yeah, sure, that sounds good. And we applied for this Marie Curie project. Because of the way the Marie Curie projects work, you can only have one supervisor, even though there were 2 people kind of involved. So I applied with one of these people and not with a second one, although obviously in the proposal, the way that it's framed, you're kind of bringing together people within a university as well as bringing yourself to that university. Now, I should go back. The problem, everything was great. We somehow ended up with a project, but the problem was I had some health problems and I needed to work part-time. The university there couldn't offer part-time work, and this meant that actually I couldn't work at all. And I'm very lucky that the University of Rijeka stepped in, and Azra Frkatović, who himself is a Marie Curie fellow. He was on the Nufel Pro scheme. He went to the Netherlands for, I can't remember how long now, but he went there and then returned back. So he's got some experience of moving around. He stepped in and said, look, we'll be able to help you. Now, this is also quite important in terms of what was being said in some previous sessions. I had a contingency plan as part of my project, that I knew that the access to the NIRS machine might be limited, or something might go wrong. And so I said in the proposal that if that happens, then we can fall back on just doing a purely eye-tracking based project. And when we were submitting the plans to move the project to Rijeka, this was pointed out by the EU, you're not going to be doing so much research within NIRS. And luckily, we had this contingency plan in place, so we could point out that this hasn't diverged too much from our original proposal. And one lucky thing about the Marie Curie projects that you're allowed secondments. I realize that Azra mentioned this as well. And so there's always the potential for me to move to a different lab temporarily to learn about this or do some research with this. So everything is still open at the moment. The slight issue for me was by the time I managed to move everything, I started the project in February last year, and about a month later, COVID hit. And so in terms of luck, I've not been particularly lucky with this project. But in some ways, this has been kind of interesting and good for me. Maybe I'm unusual in that. Obviously, this is a bit of a spanner in the works in terms of testing. So during the lockdowns, in-person testing was not possible. The universities were obviously closed for a long time. Personally, the medication I take and the health reasons mean that the doctors recommended that I don't go into work. So this is like an extra hassle for trying to work in person. But it also gave me time to sit back and reflect. I'm still working part-time, and I'm very lucky in that, so that I have a bit more time or less pressure to engage constantly in this demand to publish and produce this empirical work. And so I could kind of take a step back. And this was really important because the area that I was looking at was suffering replication problems. So I think Ivo earlier mentioned about problems with replicability and the importance of open science with solving some of these issues. And in psychology, he mentioned psychology, he also mentioned cancer biology, where there's been big projects to try and replicate research, and there's poor replication rates. And for exactly the research and the kind of cornerstone of my Marie Curie project, there's been a whole load of problems with that original research. So I guess the first research came with positive results, was coming out around 2007, I guess. And then a few years ago, one person managed to publish something with a negative result saying they can't replicate it. I assume, and at least my intuition is that there's a lot of failures to replicate this previously, it's just difficult to publish it. This one paper came out, then another paper, then another paper, then another paper. The original authors tried to replicate the research, and there's now a whole flood of failures to replicate some of the core basis of my Marie Curie project. So my luck is really bad, but this kind of interim break allowed me to kind of step back and think a little bit more about some of the issues. Now, there's a lot of issues that are in play here, but one of them relates to statistical practices within the field. A lot of this research is done with relatively small sample sizes. I think Nela Pivac was talking about this in the ERC project, that you need to talk about power analyses and things. But the problem, even in my Marie Curie proposal, I have a power analysis to justify my sample size, but it's based on the previous research. They used a small sample size. If you get a positive effect, if you get your significant p-value in that, then the effect size has to be large. So if you're basing your research on previous research, and you're using the effect size produced previously, then your replication attempt is going to also suffer from having a low sample size. So that's led me in a slightly different direction, although I'm still obviously doing the empirical research, or currently doing bits of that. I've basically been, in the last few months, been piecing together about 15 researchers from around Europe, and we're going to be developing a project looking at how these statistical results are reported in the cognitive development literature, to try and get a better understanding of exactly what's going on and why people kind of misinterpret the data and also have an expectation that there should be lots of replications when actually, if you think about it from the way that statistical practices work, these failures to replicate might actually be relatively expected. I want to point out that, like, if a few years ago you told me I'm going to be looking at statistical practices in developmental psychology and working from Croatia, I would have laughed at you and told you it wasn't going to happen. So the project has allowed me to go into a fairly new direction, which is quite nice for me. I should also say there's some other benefits that aren't kind of unique or specific to my research. I don't know how it works at other universities in Croatia, but in Rijeka, even for the whole university, you're able to take courses within the university if you're a member of staff. So for me, this is great. I get to be able to take language courses. My Croatian is bad, but improving thanks to these courses, and it's been quite nice during lockdown to at least talk to people over Skype for these lessons. The university or the faculty is also trying to develop some English language courses, so I've had some opportunities to contribute to that, which is really nice and fairly unexpected from beforehand. And so that's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ed, for sharing your story so honestly. I think it's very important that always we talk about all the good things that happen to us in science, all the good results we have, but we all know that all of us behind us have a lot of bad results, the results which are not published, results which are not going anywhere. So I think it's really important that we also share these things. So thank you very much for that. Okay, thank you all three for sharing your stories, and thank you for accepting our invitation to come here and to share your stories. I don't know if anyone from audience has any question for them, or maybe someone from the audience would like to share their story in short. I know that we have here few people more which are not from Croatia originally. Yes, Jelena, please. You can introduce yourself and tell us where did you come from and since when are you in Croatia?
Just wait for the mic. Thank you for organizing this event. I'm Jelena. I'm coming from Sarajevo, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, like similar story as Azra. CEPUS exchange brings me to Croatia and then connected me with people here and broadened my network. So I get to know about Marie Curie and I applied. And I'm still a PhD student doing the PhD at Genos and student of University of Zagreb. So I'm here now almost 5 years, I think. And I spent also some time in the Netherlands because I had my secondments there. So about experience, I think I'm really lucky that I was part of Marie Curie because these focuses on training and also public engagement are something that I think that other PhD students doesn't have opportunity to experience, and it's really important. Within our network, we did some public engagement. That's what crossed my mind now. So we did video clip about our project. That was acceptable for general public. So we have some small animations and explain our research in general language, let's say, some associations.
Sometimes it's very hard, sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it is. And also another challenge that me and all ESRs from my network experienced was also to explain what our project is about to general public, actually in France and the Netherlands. So we have completely two different environments. In France, it's a challenge to find a person who will speak English with you, and also they were actually really friendly and kind to listen to us. So it's actually helps you to develop a way of thinking how you should actually perceive the people and general public, how you should get them familiar with science, why is it important, and yeah. So
thank you.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I also it just came to my mind because both Jelena and I, as we were part of ITNs, and I have to say these public engagement, let's say, challenges that we faced also gave us this self-esteem to also challenge ourselves to participate in 3-minute thesis competition that was organized back in Bosnia, which was also a great way to kind of show people back in Bosnia what we are working on for our PhD studies, hopefully to inspire other masters and undergraduate students from Bosnia and Herzegovina to also try out to see what they could do also outside of Bosnia, but also, of course, it would be perfect to stay in Bosnia, but yeah, maybe go and come back. Yeah, that's what came to my mind, because Jelena and I were kind of first skeptical. We weren't really brave enough, but then beginning of this year, we did it.
Nice. Okay, thank you very much. Are there any more questions or comments? No? Okay, then I would finish this panel, and I think we came to the end of our event. So you can stay here, and I will call Dragomira to join me here.
I'll just mention, I forgot to say, if you want a copy of the booklet, it's there on the table.
Thank you. Okay, so we came to the very end of our two-day event. I think that most of you know that we started organizing this conference, annual conference, 2 years ago. It was autumn 2019. Yes, and then we were organized already almost everything together with the whole MCAA management and board team, and annual conference was supposed to be in the Westin Hotel, and we were in the mid-February when the COVID happened, and the conference was supposed to be in the beginning of the March, so it was in the last minute cancelling of everything, so it was a lot more job to do, but okay, since then we learned how to do the virtual conferences and everything, and today we are finally here on the first physical event after a long time, so thank you all for coming, and for those who are online for listening to us, and thanks to the all panelists who accepted our invitation in a very short notice after summer.
Yes.
Dragomira, maybe you have
just to continue on acknowledgements, I would really like to thank our technical support, which did really great job. So guys, thank you, because it looked super professional. And I would like to acknowledge our MCAA at the end, because without their support, nothing of this would be possible. So MCAA, thank you from Croatian heart. I think we can close this event and see you on the next one.
Yes, it will be soon.